We needed a case cart that was large enough, but small enough. And what we did is change the dimensions of the cart to be taller and thinner and skinnier so that we're able to move these around. And what you end up getting is a case cart that's about half the space or the floor space needed for a traditional cart. That's, again, multiplied by the time you look at an off-site sterilization, facility that needs to transport these.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
On this vendor spotlight, we are going to be speaking with Scott Cohen. He's the founder and CEO at IST Tray, and I'm sure everybody who's listening is familiar with Tray. If you're familiar with Beyond the Tour or you're following Tray on LinkedIn and Facebook, you've probably seen that they also have another product, EZ-TRAX. This was designed to reduce the number of trays, especially in orthopedics, and getting 7 trays down to 3. But now they've added a third product to their line. It's the ONE CART. That's right. It's a sealed case cart. We're going to be learning all about it today with Scott's appearance on Beyond Clean. Stay with us. We're going to be right back.
From 17 studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
All right, I have the pleasure of speaking with Scott Cohen, founder and CEO at IST Tray. And Scott, you and I quite familiar with each other because right before the world changed quite a bit for the pandemic, I got a chance to meet in person when we filmed the very second episode of Beyond the Tour and really had a fun time. And I know we're here to talk about ONE CART, which is a new addition to your product family. But I remember doing the recording of Beyond the Tour, and you gave me such a good overview of EZ-TRAX. And so for anybody who's not familiar with you all, and I can't imagine they aren't at this point if they're listening to this podcast, but there's now a line of 3 different products that all work together very well. And I want to thank you so much for coming on to the show for this special announcement.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you having me and coming back and continue to talk about what we're doing.
Well, one of the things I've always loved about your company is just the commitment to educating and working with people on the front line. And I think that gives you a lot of access to the industry to talk through the types of improvements that are going to be needed to really revolutionize how we deliver care, because the financial pressures have never been greater. You and I talk a lot about that as both being CEOs and trying to understand how this industry can improve. But I thought maybe you could just tell everybody a little bit about yourself in case they haven't seen Beyond the Tour. You and I are both registered nurses, so I love to talk about that commonality. And again, you're somebody who's done the job. Can you talk about your experience?
Sure. Yeah, I came from, the nursing background, spent time at some of the ICUs and the big systems. I wasn't in the operating room, but I kind of left nursing and got into the sales part of it, or the business end of it. Started out with Synthes for 7 or 8 years, then owned my own distributorships, and really got to see, while I did all that, the kind of the disconnect between, really the OEM, how instruments are delivered to the hospital, what the hospital does with them afterwards, and how inefficient that whole pathway is. And that was just a real struggle for me. It was I spent a lot of time as a rep on it. I spent a lot of time and money, to be honest, shipping sets in and out. And I just thought there had to be a better way. And that was kind of where we came up with, the ONE Tray was the first piece of that puzzle. And when we kind of started IST, that was the goal. The goal wasn't to have, 400 products in a catalog that, we sold everything under the sun for an SPD. It was really focused on coming up with a better delivery method for instrumentation from the OEM to the facility and have that facility be able to run more efficient and have cost savings in that configuration. So that was the goal. And that's still why today we sell our one tray sterilization container that's sealed. We sell the EZ-TRAX system. That's the adaptable internal, organizational system. And we sell this new one cart, which is, I think, answering questions and solving problems that people have known about, but haven't done anything about. And I think that's what we're here for.
Well, one of the things I think you're completely ahead of the curve on in so many ways is just that there has been this shift moving a lot of surgeries, to ambulatory surgery centers and out of the acute hospital setting, not entirely, but especially you talked about your background with Synthes, and definitely we're seeing this as it relates to orthopedics. And I think if you watch that video snippet from Beyond the Tour that we had, sort of carved out about you and I going over EZ-TRAX, just think about all the different instruments, all the different trays that have to be prepared. And efficiency is something that you just said. Every single one of these, one tray, EZ-TRAX, and now one cart, which we're going to be talking about in detail today, are focused on bringing efficiencies, but they're also adapted to a movement towards, these ASCs doing more and more procedures. And I think that's something that you must have seen it coming from a mile away.
Well, we did. I mean, unfortunately or unfortunately, you can kind of see the way this market was going to move. We knew the ASCs were going to come involved, and working in an ASC and doing large quantities of cases repetitiously is great at an ASC, but it's also challenging because of the space constraints that you have there. Not only the SPD, but where do we put everything? How do we turn it over? Where does it go? How does it come in? All that kind of stuff is just amplified, 10x over a hospital that has to deal with it. And unfortunately, the hospitals are still doing it an archaic way. It's frustrating when I see the hospitals and the facilities look at, well, let's keep everything wrapped and sterile just in case the 12 before that fall on the floor. And I just preach. I feel like sometimes that's just the most inefficient way to run any business, let alone one that has such severe costs in, getting that instrumentation sterilized. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take each piece of our puzzle, which is, the one tray really brings down the processing time of any of the trays that you're running. So it's, 20 minutes versus 2+ hours with everybody else. The secondary part of that we created was the EZ-TRAX, like we talked about. And the goal of that was to take these gargantuan knee sets and hip sets that are out there. And again, I go back to when I started, they were 2 trays, and we did knees and hips just as fast and just as well with those 2 trays of instrumentation, I believe, as they do today. But they have grown to this 7 tray configuration. And I think over time that just became something that was accepted, and it's very difficult for the OEM to go backwards from there. So we wanted to kind of come up with a solution with the EZ-TRAX side of this to say, we have a solution. We've created EZ-TRAX. We have a unique way of validating these sets, and we have the ability to go get FDA clearances specific to those sets in these configurations, because that's very key with what an OEM is looking at. They have to deliver a set in a configuration that has been validated, and then they can't do anything else after that, because to change, an instrument position or removal or deletion would mean that validation wouldn't be true. So what we've tried to do with the EZ-TRAX is be able to take a 7-8 tray set of instrumentation and condense that down. Now, I want to say condense, so everybody understands condense versus removal. We're just taking all the instruments and all the dead air space that are in those 7 trays, and we're reducing those down to very compact 1-level sets in the 3 tray configuration. So you're getting 3 single levels versus 7 outer and inner trays plus 11 levels of instrumentation involved in that. And that's the goal. It's to deliver that. Now, if you want to go smaller than that, utilizing the EZ-TRAX system, we validated it to be able to do that. Meaning the validation shows that anything less than our worst case scenario validation has the ability to be changed at the hospital level. So if you want to get custom with your surgeon, you have that ability. And the only way to do that is through our unique way of validation in a way. And I won't go into that, but it's very unique. We're the only ones that can do it. And the way that that's validated gives us the opportunity to be able to reconfigure those sets if needed there. So the goal was obviously have the one tray. Then secondarily was have the EZ-TRAX system where we go from 7 trays to 3. Automatically, a hospital or a surgery center now has to deal with 3 trays of instrumentation versus 7. The cost therein is extensively less, 65+% less to process that instrumentation. We're doing it faster because of the one tray. Those trays could now go up to the operative field, and your nurse opens the top tray, pull out the 3 inner trays, not the 7 outer and inner trays on a separate back table, but just the 3 inner trays that's needed with the instrumentation on the same back table. So we eliminate a back table in most cases, and then eliminate the time that the tech would need to hunt and peck through 7 trays and 11 levels of instrumentation for the 25% of the instrumentation that they're actually going to need for that case. And we've done that. We've done the studies on it, and we're saving anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes on the front side and the back side of that case. Those are real OR minutes that are saved over the traditional configuration that the OEMs come out with.
Yeah. And you're talking a lot about that footprint, right? So as you consolidate less trays, you need less space in the carts to transport the instrumentation as well, which is why I said you must have been looking into a crystal ball to kind of predict the future, because as we move more into this ASC space, you called it out, a smaller footprint. And I think the one cart's got a design that's very unique, and it's taking these efficiencies that you've already put into place with one tray and EZ-TRAX and leveraging that also for reduced space to be taken up when it comes to transportation as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're exactly right. What we saw in the market was obviously this move to ASCs, but now there's a secondary movement to offsite sterilization facilities. And there's a lot of companies. We work with 2 of the big ones, the new startups, as they're using us. But what the need was a case cart, like you said, that didn't have to hold 7 trays of instrumentation plus everything else. We needed a case cart that was large enough, but small enough. And what we did is change the dimensions of the cart to be taller and thinner and skinnier, so that we're able to move these around. And what you end up getting is a case cart that's about half the space or the floor space needed for a traditional cart. That's, again, multiplied by the time you look at an offsite sterilization facility that needs to transport these. We did make the cases sealed for that reason, so that they are sealed for the offsite community, and they have a window in them. So you can look at the individual sets and look at everything without opening that case cart in the field or outside of either the clean room where they're put together or the operative environment, which is really how you want to do that. We think we kind of ticked off every box, and it's been really satisfying to see some of the bigger ASCs that take on this as a complete change in philosophy on how they're going to deliver instrumentation to the OR. And we want to make it efficient for multiple reasons. Usually there's cost savings that come along with that, but probably the biggest thing we uncovered as well was the time savings in case turnover. When you start saving 10 to 12 minutes on average, and if we've seen it much worse than that as well, you start really getting an hour or 2 back at the end of the day. So those guys that are frustrated doing 5 total knees at an ASC can now do 6 or 7 in about the same time frame. And it's a huge win for, not only the ASCs, the hospitals, but all the facilities and the surgeons and the potential patients. So that's kind of how we see this. We have the one tray as the processing engine that gets us efficient on that end. We have the EZ-TRAX system that gets us efficient in the operative environment, coming, with the case setup and tear down. We have the transportation now, and all our trays and case carts have been transportation studied, meaning we've done all the offsite studies for transportation, inclusive of our trays, EZ-TRAX, full sets, you name it. And I don't think there's anybody else out there that's doing, near the testing that we are looking at the market as it comes into being.
Yeah, I have definitely seen that struggle, especially even with facilities that were moving to an offsite plan and weren't really sure about DOT regulations and how to deal with the transportation of soiled instrumentation. I think that sealed cart model, and then having done that due diligence that you just described there, not just for the one cart, but for the other two products that all fit together in this comprehensive puzzle to create the efficiency, I think is really important. And I think all the time about how many case carts, the traditional large ones sitting in hallways, creating congestion. And I think to myself, especially in an ASC setting, that makes it really difficult because oftentimes processing's on the same floor as the procedures. And so the cluttering of hallways is even a bigger issue in those settings than I think you might even see especially in a newly renovated acute facility like a hospital where, they got those bigger, wider hallways and you have two different areas where sterile processing is maybe on a different floor, that kind of a setting. But especially in the ASCs, getting that floor space back and not having these gigantic case carts occupying the hallways, that has to create efficiency too, just from staff being able to move more freely throughout the facility.
Our first few customers were kind of identified prior to even pulling the case cart onto the market, because in those ASC settings, they were taking plastic bins and putting the sets inside those, delivering them into the operating room because they didn't have room for case carts. So this was their case cart replacement. And we just discussed how absurd that is. Not that they have to use a plastic bin, but that there's nothing else out there that can fit that niche of ASC delivery into the operating room through a cart that makes sense for that facility. And that's where all that kind of came from. And it's been, knock on wood, great. We've got a great response from the field.
That's excellent. And also, something else that I noticed is adjustable shelves. So there is some configurability with the one cart that you built into it. And I love the window, being able to see what's inside of the case cart. I mean, obviously there's pick lists and things like that get taped on or, tagged in with the, count sheet holders on a lot of the case carts and things like that. But there's just nothing that can replace the ability to, physically observe the trays that are in the actual case cart itself.
Well, I think, as a rep and seeing it in the operating room, I can't tell you how many times that case cart's open and closed and which one's this one. Let's double check and make sure it's Dr. X's third case. It says here on the outside, but we're going to open it up. It just removes that part of the problem. Something very simple that we did. It's not free. We have to, put that into our budget on what we're doing when we're building the cart, but I think it's worthwhile. And I think we really built a pretty solid standard for the industry and the ASCs at this point.
All right. Well, I know that coming out in May, there's going to be a Becker's editorial and there's going to be comments from a number of the beta users' firsthand experience. And you were kind of alluding to that. You already had somebody in mind. The beta user experience, like, how do you identify who you're going to do that with? Is it somebody that you already work with regularly that is just constantly engaged in new innovation with you as an organization? How does that work?
Well, like all our products, you have to have somebody that not necessarily can think out of the box, but can think to the future, understands sterilization as it sits today and works at bringing on new technologies to make their life and their facilities' life much better. That's the people that we go after. We look at partners in innovation. A lot of them are new ASCs that have just come on board. Most of them are orthopedic focused, if not all orthopedic. And that's what we're seeing in the marketplace is, these orthopedic ASCs are going up, very, very fast. There's a lot of them going up. There's a huge need for specialized, delivery processing type products that we have and others, by the way. That's where we're seeing the big gain and who we find our customers and our beta site testers as well.
Yeah. I just like it when product innovation is really being guided by an end user. And I like what you said. A lot of the beta users are folks that have that vision of, okay, we're seeing these trends in the marketplace. And because of these trends, we know that here are some challenges for us to be able to keep up with those trends, and then being able to share that as you and your team go through. And, something else as we're kind of wrapping up here, but you're purposeful.
Isn't that our job as a company who solves problems? Listen to the customer, find out what the problems or the challenges are, and then see if you can come up with solutions through a product delivery. I mean, that's what I always envisioned a business for. We could have easily come out with a traditional rigid container and a traditional basket and a traditional case cart and tried to market those to people and, maybe be successful because we could undercut everybody from a price standpoint. But that's not what we're here to do. What we're here to do is solve the problems that are in the industry that we have with the innovations that we can bring to the table. And that's all we've focused on since day one, 10 years ago.
Yeah. And when you and I were preparing for this conversation, you were talking about kind of that same conversation about we could have gone to the market and tried to just be the best priced competitor instead of truly, innovating and coming up with something different. But you also said, this is why we don't bring on all of these ancillary products or solutions, et cetera, that we stay very purposeful and in our wheelhouse so that we are hitting on, this very specific value point that you're bringing. And I thought that was something I hadn't really thought of before. I mean, see lots of companies, they bring in a detergent, they have add-on services to kind of what we love to say in the industry, as two nurses who have gone to the sales side, just have more in your bag to talk to people about. And instead, I think you take more of a consulting approach and really dialing in on, the inherent issues of the amount of volume, the amount of instrumentation, and the amount of time that these inefficiencies wind up costing on the bottom line from a business perspective, the hospitals and ASCs and what will be emerging as many more offsite reprocessing centers in the future.
Well, I think, solving those, what I deemed major problems with instrument delivery was a lot more important than trying to inch my revenue up by selling some other ancillary products. That's just not the business I want to be in and why I enjoy what I do, which is, creating and innovating the products with the team that I have. We really enjoy what we do, as you can probably tell, but it would have been much easier to come out with a quote, Me Too container and just try to sell that. And that would have been much easier to bring into the market than a completely different container and a different organizational system and a different case cart. But, we're bound and determined to make this the standard in the industry.
All right. Well, I want to let everybody know that there's some ways to learn about the One Cart, specifically bonus content. We're going to have some literature that's attached to our smartphone app for iPhone and Android. So if you download that and click on this episode, there's a little gift box icon at the top. Click on that and you'll actually be able to look at the product and literature information while you're listening to this podcast. And also we're going to include a YouTube link that is going to show you the One Cart going through the entire process from SPD up to the OR and back again, which I think will help people really understand what we've been talking about today, Scott. And I do want to point everybody in the direction of onetray.com. You can also find them on LinkedIn, Facebook. You can call them 937-619-0138 or send an email to info@onetray.com. And of course, as always, Scott, we like to say, follow the One Tray IFU for use. That way we hit that one home. But this was a great interview. I want to commend you on constant innovation. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up today?
Well, just, current customers and potential customers, call us. I am happy to go prove this to you. I know a lot of people talk about efficiency and cost savings and all that kind of stuff. We've proven it. We've done studies. We do it day in and day out when we install at these facilities. We see it, from the weeks and months afterwards. And then we see it morph into even more efficient because they get on that efficiency kind of train and enjoy it. So if you have any other questions or anybody's interested, call us. We'll be happy to go through everything with you.
Excellent, Scott. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Justin.
That was Scott Cohen, founder and CEO at ONE Tray, introducing the third product in their line called ONE CART, and they all fit together perfectly. ONE Tray, EZ-TRAX, and ONE CART. I thought Scott did a really nice job of just kind of outlining the efficiencies and how they're targeting creating those efficiencies, not only for hospitals, but really specifically in this emerging ASC market, specifically around orthopedics. And then also we're seeing more and more off-site reprocessing and having a case cart that can transport external to the facility for off-site reprocessing, a sealed container to make sure that there's no spills is really excellent. But I think the size and just the footprint and the amount of space that it's taking up is such an improvement, especially for these new settings, these new ASCs. And again, as Scott and I talked about on Beyond the Tour, and there's another video snippet of us going over the EZ-TRAX, but 7 trays down to 3 into the 1 tray and into the ONE CART. Space savings, definitely improving turnaround time. Just a great innovation from a company focused on innovating the way we deliver surgical care. So big thanks to Scott for joining us today for this big announcement. I do want to remind everyone that we have bonus content that's available on our smartphone app for iPhone and Android. It also happens to be the best way to listen to the Beyond Clean podcast. So we'd love it if you downloaded it, gave us a rating and a review. We're also going to have a YouTube link in the show notes, so you'll be able to find that on the smartphone app, or if you're seeing the post on LinkedIn or listening on your favorite podcast feed, certainly just look at the show notes and you'll find that link. It'll take you to see the ONE CART going through the entire process from SPD to the OR and back again. Visit their website, onetray.com. Find them on LinkedIn, Facebook. Email them info@onetray.com or give them a call, 937-619-0138. Follow the ONE Tray IFU for use. And again, thank you everybody for listening. Follow Beyond Clean on LinkedIn and Facebook. Comment on these posts. Tell us what you think. If there's topics that you'd like us to cover on a future episode, you think that's been missing, or maybe we need to go into a little bit more detail, send an email to info@beyondclean.net. And thank you for listening to this vendor spotlight today on Beyond Clean.